Look at this breathtaking aerial view of the sparkling lake, triumphantly reaching its maximum legal water limit after surviving 5 grueling years of devastating and unrelenting ecological drought. The surrounding local communities are joyfully celebrating this beautiful ecological revival, completely unaware that the steep price of this supposed miracle could actually be their absolute and total sudden destruction. You see $15 billion worth of luxurious real estate glittering along the pristine shoreline, forming a wealthy paradise that seemingly defies the harsh realities of the surrounding rugged wilderness. But this stunning and life-giving abundance of fresh mountain water is secretly harboring a dark and terrifying reality that will inevitably bring a catastrophic nightmare to these vibrant coastal towns. Beneath the completely calm and glassy surface of this majestic reservoir lies an incomprehensible 39 trillion gallons of incredibly heavy liquid pressing brutally hard onto the fragile earth crust below. To truly grasp the terrifying magnitude of this immense volume, imagine enough icy water to completely submerge the entire massive state of California under 14 solid inches of freezing liquid. Right now, that unfathomable and colossal weight is violently bearing down onto a highly unstable 25-mile crack, sleeping quietly in the dark depths across the entire lake floor. This unseen geological monster is essentially a ticking time bomb, fully capable of unleashing a devastating 7.3 magnitude earthquake that would completely shatter the surrounding mountain landscape. When this massive fault line inevitably fractures, the violently shifting lake floor will suddenly thrust billions of gallons upward to create a terrifying 30-foot mountain tsunami almost instantly. This is not just a simple natural disaster, but rather a perfectly engineered trap where the newly returned water acts as a fatal trigger for unprecedented geological destruction. A towering wall of angry water will relentlessly rip across the enclosed lake surface at a blinding speed of 100 miles per hour, annihilating absolutely everything in its path. The terrifying reality of this isolated mountainous terrain means that terrified local residents and trapped tourists will have exactly 5 minutes to frantically run for their absolute lives. But as you look around this heavily enclosed basin surrounded by incredibly steep and unforgiving peaks, you must ask yourself a chilling question. Where exactly are you going to run? The joyful cheers celebrating the end of the devastating dry spell will soon be violently replaced by the deafening roar of an inescapable watery grave that nobody ever saw coming. To understand this impending doom, we must dive deep into the freezing abyss to confront a terrifying geological monster known specifically by scientists as the dreaded West Tahoe fault line. This immensely powerful and highly volatile tectonic boundary has been ominously sleeping without a single major rupture for an incredibly terrifying span of over 4,000 consecutive years. During these 4 millennia of deceptive silence, the immense geological pressure accumulating beneath the bedrock has reached a critical breaking point that desperately demands an explosive and violent release. Seismologists confidently predict that when this specific fault finally snaps, it will generate a monstrous earthquake measuring an absolutely devastating 7.3 on the widely used Richter scale. To put that immense destructive power into perspective, this looming aquatic disaster would strike 2.5 times harder than the legendary earthquake that famously crippled San Francisco in 1989. You might logically wonder why the long-awaited return of life-giving rain and melting snow is actually the exact catalyst triggering this unprecedented level of catastrophic geological destruction. The terrifying answer lies in the sheer brutal physics of the previously mentioned 39 trillion gallons of heavy liquid that is violently crushing the delicate Earth crust downwards. This sudden and monumental addition of localized planetary weight physically forces the rocky lake bottom to aggressively warp and bend, placing unimaginable structural stress on the ancient sleeping fault below. But the crushing weight is only half of this deadly equation, because the steadily rising water level is simultaneously acting as a highly efficient and incredibly dangerous subterranean geological lubricant. As the deep basin rapidly fills to its maximum capacity, microscopic streams of high-pressure water relentlessly force their way down into the jagged and deeply buried tectonic crevices. This violently injected fluid brutally forces the tightly locked tectonic plates apart, effectively destroying the natural rocky friction that has historically prevented these massive subterranean shelves from dangerously sliding around. Instead of safely gripping onto each other, these massive continental puzzle pieces are now heavily greased and precariously teetering on the absolute edge of a violent and unstoppable sudden slip. If you stubbornly believe that a simple lake cannot possibly trigger a massive tectonic event, human history painfully provides a wealth of terrifying evidence to violently shatter your dangerous skepticism. Let us critically examine the devastating historical tragedy that brutally struck the heavily populated Sichuan province of China back in the catastrophic year of 2008. Scientists strongly suspect that the massive weight and lubricating water of the newly constructed Zipingpu Reservoir directly triggered an absolutely monstrous 7.9 magnitude earthquake in that region. That specific human-engineered aquatic disaster ruthlessly wiped entire thriving cities directly off the geographical map, tragically resulting in the heartbreaking and sudden loss of nearly 80,000 innocent lives. Similarly, another deadly artificial lake located in western India previously triggered a horrific 6.3 magnitude tremor that completely devastated a once peaceful surrounding local community decades ago. These documented historical tragedies scientifically prove a terrifying concept known as induced seismicity, where massive bodies of concentrated water directly manipulate and aggressively awaken dormant faults within the Earth crust. If a moderately sized artificial dam can effortlessly slaughter tens of thousands of people, imagine what a colossal natural mountain lake holding 39 trillion gallons will soon unleash upon us. The desperately needed water has officially transformed from a beautiful ecological savior into a merciless geological executioner, actively pulling the deadly trigger on a trap set 4,000 years ago. When the mounting pressure finally breaks the ancient stone, the violently shifting lake floor will suddenly thrust billions of gallons of water violently upward into the calm mountain air. This catastrophic geological displacement will instantly generate an unimaginably massive wall of dark, angry water, standing an absolutely terrifying 30 feet tall, right in the middle of the lake. Unlike ocean waves that slowly build up over massive distances, this towering mountain tsunami will just aggressively explode upwards without any previous warning signs or receding coastal shorelines. Fueled by the immense energy of the 7.3 magnitude earthquake, this unstoppable liquid mountain will rapidly accelerate to a blinding speed of 100 miles per hour. Ripping violently across the enclosed surface, the massive watery bulldozer will relentlessly crush absolutely every single multi-million-dollar property and luxury resort built along the supposedly peaceful shoreline. The sheer devastating kinetic energy of a 30-foot wave moving at 100 miles per hour will effortlessly snap massive pine trees, like completely fragile dry wooden matchsticks. But the absolute worst part of this specific mountain nightmare is a terrifying scientific phenomenon that geologists and aquatic experts grimly refer to as the deadly bathtub reflection effect. If a tsunami hits an open ocean beach, the violent energy eventually dissipates inland, as the dark water freely spreads out over incredibly massive and flat surrounding geographical plains. However, this specific high-altitude lake is essentially a giant sealed basin tightly locked inside a harsh perimeter of extremely steep and completely unforgiving solid granite mountain peaks. Because the incredibly fast and angry water cannot freely spread outwards, the monstrous 30-foot wave will violently slam into the eastern shore and completely obliterate the busy local communities. Instead of peacefully receding, that immense kinetic energy has absolutely nowhere else to logically go, forcing the massive wall of heavy water to aggressively bounce directly back off the unyielding Rocky Mountains. The giant turbulent wave will forcefully reflect backward like a massive liquid mirror, creating a secondary devastating tsunami that violently races back across the lake to absolutely crush the opposing western shore. This horrific back-and-forth reflection process will mercilessly repeat itself over and over again, violently sloshing billions of gallons of heavy water continuously for several utterly terrifying hours. The enclosed natural basin essentially transforms into a colossal geological blender, relentlessly grinding shattered luxury mansions, massive uprooted pine trees, and thousands of vehicles into a completely toxic, swirling, muddy soup. Anyone who miraculously survives the devastating initial earthquake and the terrifying first tidal wave will inevitably be violently sucked right back into this inescapable, swirling vortex of dark, watery destruction. Emergency rescue operations during these incredibly chaotic, sloshing hours will be completely impossible, leaving severely injured and desperately terrified survivors totally abandoned in the freezing and violent, dark, muddy water. The supposedly calm blue waters of this highly expensive mountain tourist destination will rapidly devolve into a dark, churning nightmare of shredded debris and unimaginable, absolute, total human agonizing suffering. Nature is effectively turning one of the most beautiful and highly sought-after geographical locations in the entire world into an incredibly brutal and absolutely inescapable high-altitude natural washing machine. The sheer, unending violence of this endless reflective wave cycle ensures that virtually nothing built along the immediate shoreline will remain proudly standing when the heavy, muddy water finally settles down. This horrifying enclosed wave dynamic explicitly demonstrates exactly why a sudden, massive tsunami occurring safely inside an isolated mountain lake is exponentially more deadly than one hitting a completely open ocean beach. If you are currently sitting there stubbornly thinking that a massive body of fresh water causing a catastrophic earthquake is just pure science fiction, recorded human history violently disagrees with you. Scientists around the world explicitly use a highly specific academic term called induced seismicity to accurately describe exactly how concentrated water weight forcefully triggers dormant subterranean tectonic fault lines. We must carefully examine the incredibly devastating historical tragedy that suddenly struck a completely unsuspecting local community located in western India back in the tragic year of 1967. The newly constructed Koyna Reservoir gathered a massive volume of water, unexpectedly creating immense geological stress that violently ruptured the deeply buried underlying rock formation almost immediately upon filling. This seemingly innocent artificial lake tragically triggered a terrifying 6.3 magnitude earthquake, instantly crushing vulnerable homes and violently ending nearly 200 completely innocent human lives. However, that specific Indian catastrophe mathematically pales in comparison to the truly apocalyptic nightmare that absolutely destroyed the mountainous Sichuan province of China in the year 2008. The incredibly massive Zipingpu Dam aggressively hoarded billions of tons of heavy river water directly above a highly unstable and notoriously dangerous ancient geological fault line hidden deep underground. International geologists overwhelmingly believe that this unnaturally accumulated water weight successfully acted as the primary deadly catalyst for an absolutely horrific 7.9 magnitude tectonic subterranean explosion. That entirely human-induced seismic event violently ripped the earth completely open, tragically burying whole vibrant cities and brutally slaughtering roughly 80,000 completely unsuspecting innocent people. These carefully documented historical tragedies undeniably prove that the immense gravitational weight of deeply pooled mountain water can effectively shatter even the thickest layers of incredibly solid granite bedrock. Furthermore, the aggressively creeping moisture from these deep lakes effectively lubricates the ancient subterranean stone, completely removing the natural friction holding the dangerous tectonic plates safely bound together. Now we must critically compare those relatively small artificial human dams to the unbelievably massive and ancient natural mountain basin currently holding the pristine Lake Tahoe waters together. If a moderately sized man-made concrete reservoir can effortlessly trigger a disaster that quickly kills 80,000 innocent people, we truly face an absolutely terrifying and inescapable reality. Lake Tahoe is currently hoarding an incomprehensible 39 trillion gallons of heavy liquid, pressing directly down onto a notoriously overdue 4,000-year-old subterranean fault line. This absolutely massive alpine lake essentially represents an incredibly dangerous ticking geological time bomb that is exponentially larger and infinitely more destructive than those previous devastating historical examples. We are essentially watching a completely blind society gleefully celebrating the dangerous reloading of the absolute largest natural aquatic weapon ever pointed directly at an unsuspecting human population. The terrifying historical evidence completely destroys any lingering optimistic doubt, absolutely proving that this beautiful returning water will eventually become the ultimate destructive instrument of our unavoidable geographical doom. To make this impending natural disaster even more absolutely terrifying, we must critically examine the complete and utter failure of our entirely unprepared modern human emergency infrastructure. Unlike coastal ocean, cities constantly threatened by giant waves, this isolated high-altitude tourist destination severely lacks any dedicated tsunami warning sirens or clear emergency evacuation routes. Because nobody ever logically expects a catastrophic tidal wave to violently strike the very top of a mountain, the local population remains completely blind and horribly vulnerable. When that monstrous 30-foot wall of dark, muddy water inevitably explodes upwards, hundreds of thousands of panicked tourists will desperately scramble towards their parked vehicles immediately. However, the surrounding geographical terrain features incredibly narrow, violently twisting mountain highways that can barely support normal daily traffic during peaceful and highly predictable summer vacation weekends. Within merely seconds of the initial terrifying earthquake, those steep, isolated escape routes will instantly transform into an absolutely inescapable, miles-long apocalyptic vehicular parking lot. Trapped tightly inside their completely gridlocked cars, thousands of terrified families will hopelessly watch the fast-approaching dark water racing towards them at 100 miles per hour. There is a profoundly dark and bitter irony surrounding the glittering $15 billion worth of luxury real estate currently lining this dangerously fragile rocky geographical basin. Wealthy investors blindly poured endless capital into building massive, breathtaking wooden mansions, ignorantly constructing their ultimate dream homes directly on top of a loaded geological weapon. Unfortunately, Mother Nature frankly does not care about high property values, expensive tourist revenue, or the immense social status of the incredibly wealthy people living nearby. The Earth operates purely on a completely different timeline known as geological time, completely ignoring the incredibly brief and arrogant span of modern recorded human history. 4,000 years might feel like an absolutely unimaginable eternity to us humans, but to a sleeping fault line, it is merely a violently fast-passing heartbeat. As the beautiful clear water returns to fill this majestic mountain crater to the absolute brim, the hidden subterranean countdown clock silently ticks much closer to zero. The agonizingly dry years are officially over, but this spectacular watery miracle has secretly prepared the perfect geographical stage for our total, unavoidable, violent, catastrophic doom. Because underneath that mesmerizingly calm blue surface, the brutal physics of 39 trillion gallons are tirelessly working to tear this fragile, rocky world completely apart forever.